What's up, gangsters? I hear some of you guys want to go through my drawers. Yeah, that sounds weird, but hey, it is what it is, right? No judgment here. Anyway, in all seriousness, I've been promising a tool tour since I moved into my new studio space, and I did that little studio tour video a week or so ago. So yeah, absolutely. I know that it's something that I kind of am always curious about, to see what other model makers have in their workshops. Sometimes I get new ideas about new tools that I need to add to my own stash. Or maybe that's just my inner tool whore convincing me to spend money. Who knows? Anyway, let's go have a look. All right, I think I'll start over here at the tanker desk. And then I'll just work my way all the way around. This will probably take a little while because, as you can see, I have a lot of drawers. Now there will probably be, I probably won't do this all in one take. There will be some jump cuts, whatever I can do to make it as seamless as possible. But anyway, here we go. The tanker desk, there's a couple of things on top there. One is my big photo printer. I use that for printing mostly photography prints, but I'll also use it occasionally for decals, reference photos, things like that. And it's great for all that. You don't have to have a $900 photo printer for doing decals, but it certainly does good color tones. That little white thing there next to it, that is my Silhouette Portrait 2 cutter. And obviously I use that for cutting masks, and it's fantastic. But this is kind of my print station. If I get myself a 3D printer, it's probably going to go there. This desk, as you can see, this is a genuine steel case vintage desk. Who knows? This thing is probably 60 or 70 years old, maybe more. And my favorite thing about it, other than how awesomely heavy duty it is the fact that I pulled it out of a trash pile in Dallas. Got it for free with a matching chair. Anyway, this drawer, yeah, all photography stuff. I got rid of most of my professional photography gear because I just wasn't using it, but I still have kept, what I feel like are the essentials. And as you can see, I am a Canon guy. All right, that's that for that set of drawers. Okay, next set of drawers. I love these vintage filing cabinets. They're not very efficient because you lose a lot of vertical space, obviously, but they are super heavy duty, and I got them for free. So that, obviously, you have to love. And this drawer, if I can get it open, is my chemical storage drawer. I'm 100% certain this goes against all kinds of fire codes, but it is what it is. At least this cabinet won't burn if something in here ignites. But this is basically all of my bulk chemical storage, paint thinners, IPA, polishing compound, bicycle chain lube, mineral spirits, lacquer thinner, you name it. There's some 2K urethane there. There's all kinds of stuff in here. There's even some electroplating solution down there. So that's that. The bottom drawer is just another bulk tool storage drawer. So since I'm passing by this antique chair, I'll point these out because I'm super stoked about it. If you have rolly chairs, yeah, if you get frustrated when you're rolling over cords or across carpet or whatever, these wheel kits that you can get on Amazon for like 30 or 40 bucks, they are fantastic. These are rollerblade wheels with bearings in them. They will turn your chair into a hot rod. Like, it'll roll almost too easily. I've even got them on this chair, which is already a pretty high zoot chair. In fact, hang on, let me show you because it's also an important tool. This is a Herman Miller Mira chair. This is what I park my dumbass in for my modeling sessions. And these things are fantastic. I know a lot of guys I see it regularly. Dudes are asking, what kind of chair should I get for my workbench? This thing is tough to beat in terms of adjustability and durability. Herman Miller makes great quality, but they are super expensive. Like you'll see these chairs brand new for as much as $1,000. But it's an industrial grade chair. I mean, this is made for people who are sitting in the office, you know, 8 or 10 hours a day or whatever. But you can also get them on eBay, and if you're quick, you can get pretty good deals on them. Like I paid $250 for this one, you know, and it's big, so it cost $100 to ship it, but still. Would not want anything else to preserve my back condition. Okay, here we go. Next set of drawers. And this little Bisley thing is one of my favorites. You can get these for $125, and they're great. They are just tall enough for a lot of stuff. And holy shit, yeah, I'm going to be really sad if I dump one of these drawers out. That's one thing about them. They don't have stops, so you can totally yank them all the way out and spill them on the floor. Ask me how I know. Anyway, there's some good stuff in here. This is my punch and die set from Micromark. It's really good because it, as you can see, has a clear plexiglass top. So that lets you position the punches wherever you need them. Like if you're punching instrument faces out of a decal sheet or something like that, where the location of the hole matters. If you don't care about the location of the holes, then this UMM punch set is my go-to. This thing is really well engineered, works great. It's not cheap, but I've got 2 of them, and they give you a range of sizes. And I've got the other one in my super hole puncher, which I'll get to towards the end of this tool tour. But these things are great. I think that they're really the best design. Okay, that is a photo etch bender, which I never use. This is solder paste, which is great if you're doing photo etch. Solder paste has a tendency to get dried out and hard. When you buy the little tubs of it, these syringes seem to keep indefinitely, and I've got 2 different melting points, a low and a high, so you can do, you can take advantage of that. That's my Dremel torch, but for reasons I'll show you later, I don't use it hardly any anymore. This is just a little ceramic thing that's great for doing torch soldering on, because you can kind of use it as a fixture. That is my thinner line circle cutter, which I never use since I got the Silhouette. Okay, that's that drawer. Next drawer down, magnets. They're great for lots of things. Putting assemblies together that you want to be able to take apart later, or for doing, some dry fitting things. Master's brush cleaner. You need this if you care about your paint brushes. I've got some dense ply in here and some acrylic nail powder. That's for mixing with super glue to form, either a kind of a putty or just do like giant gap filling or strengthening. I use it sometimes on the inside of a fuselage to make sure that it's got plenty of strength. So that's good stuff to have around. All right, lots of tube type things in here, just some different cements, some polishing compounds. This is kind of my favorite of the lacquer spot glazing compound type of putties. It's almost the same as Bondo 907, which is great, but it's a little denser, polishes a little better, or sands a little smoother rather, so I like that a lot. This is my UV glue, which is super handy for a lot of things. Rather than buying Bondic and paying way too much money for it, I buy this. It's from a company called River Run. They make fly tying supplies. And I got both of these viscosities, a thin and a thick, plus the UV flashlight for $20 on Amazon. One thing I mention a lot when talking about things like polish and compounds is ZAM. That's what this is. This stuff is great. It requires a motorized polishing tool, because what you do is you run the polish in the end of it, and it kind of melts it onto the wheel, and then you get busy with your polishing. It's basically made for polishing clear acrylic or Lexan, and I learned that from the industrial model makers in one of my previous lives at a place I worked at. And it's really good for that. And it's nice because you don't make a huge mess like you do with liquid polishing compounds. This is one of my most valuable drawers. This is the drawer I would defend with a shotgun if somebody invaded my home. This is all of my various wires, easy line, stuff that I use for detail work when I want to make wires, hoses, cables, pipes, things like that. I've collected this over time, and I've got stuff, this is a great collection of lead wire that I got from Bass Pro that goes from 10 thousandths of an inch up to 35 thousandths of an inch. That's 2.25 millimeters up to 1 millimeter for you guys in metric land, and that's a super valuable thing. But I've got some stuff like this right here. This is vape burner wire, and you can see goes down, it's 38 gauge, which means 0.003 inches, 3 thousandths of an inch. So just under 0.1 millimeters. That is, that's about the smallest I've ever found, and you can see just how skinny it is. So that's really good stuff. Yeah, there's just a lot of valuable things in that drawer. Bottom drawer, perfect for Tamiya and guns bottles, and that's what all is in here. Just a lot of different paints and even some Winsor & Newton inks over there. Okay, this thing just worth a mention. This is just an inexpensive cutting board that I picked up at Walmart. It's made out of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, so there's nothing that can react to it. It comes in handy for things, various things occasionally. All right, back there behind, you've got a stack of Lazy Susans, turntables, and jigs. Okay, that's the Benchmate jig that I designed for Masterpiece models. One of those is the large size for 32nd scale aircraft or big bombers. The other smaller one that's kind of tucked in there is the 48th scale one. All right. I mentioned I'm a Canon guy. That's my Canon EOS R that I use for all my photography these days. I mentioned these on the shop tour video. These are Yongnuo YN600s, about 4,500 lumens of light each. And then, the fixturing that I've got there, which I may or may not change. All right, another vintage filing cabinet with a couple of drawers, and there's a lot of stuff in these. This is sort of my bulk supplies drawer. Paint, my mask for when I need to wear that, for respiratory protection in the paint booth. Just, different things, epoxy. You never know when you need a soft towel to work on to protect the bottom of your aircraft model. Pipettes, love these. Q-tips, glue, tape, just different stuff. Toothpicks, basically all kinds of disposable supplies. A really important one there, a box of MT washi tape, which I use in place of Tamiya tape. That whole box right there is 10 or 12 bucks, and it's fantastic stuff. It's super soft and thin, and I love it. It's for me, it's a much better value than Tamiya tape and performs at least as well. Aives epoxy clay, which is useful for sculpting. It's a two-part epoxy putty. Great stuff. These 3M Post-it notes, gotta have some of those. Those are really good as quick masks. I use those a lot. But this thing, if I could grab it, is not Post-it notes. This is one that came from one of our dentists who's in Scale Modelers Critique Group. You can see it's slick and shiny. This is basically a sheet of paper that's covered in some kind of protective plastic, so chemicals cannot soak into it. It's waterproof, and dentists use this for mixing up whatever kind of compound they're going to put on your tooth sometimes. And so it's perfect for us for mixing a little bit of two-part epoxy, a little bit of paint, a place to put a little dab of super glue, whatever. because then you just peel that sheet off and throw it away, just like a Post-it note. These things are one of the greatest finds ever. Use them all the time. Mixing cups, plastic cups for mixing paint. Gotta have those. Those are invaluable. Let's see, bunch of glue type things. Oh, here's one I don't want to miss. These things are also great in the disposable mixing utility category. These are called laboratory weighing boats. They're just basically little heavy-duty tinfoil dishes, so they're totally disposable and recyclable. Again, if you need to mix up a wash or something like that, and you don't, want to have to clean it out because you're lazy like me. Okay, lots of good stuff in this drawer. All of that back there is just scratch building supplies. Plastic sheet, balsa wood, just anything like that I might use for scratch building or detailing. Most of what you see here in these Ziploc bags is just all of my many sanding supplies. I'm kind of a sanding whore. It's like a subcategory of being a tool whore, I guess. But there's, all kinds of different situations that we get into when we're having to do body work. So I try to have something for every situation. This bag is all sanding sponges. These Infinity sanding sponges are fantastic. They're the best I've found. I've got some 3M ones in there. I don't really care for them that much because they're kind of stiff and gnarly. But I've also got some Tamiya ones in here. You can see that. And they are pretty good. That block right there, that is part of my Goodman sanding block set. And those are pretty cool. They are just, it's just a clear acrylic block with sandpaper bonded to it. So it's totally rigid for those cases where you need the opposite of a sanding sponge. You got to keep a surface planar, and flat. So planar and flat, that's pretty redundant. Anyway, this is a very valuable bag of stuff right here. Got a hairdryer in there for those occasions when you need to really get some paint or something dry quickly. Speaking of paint, yeah, this is just a box of all kinds of paint that I've been given or purchased over the years. But it all has the commonality of it's pretty much all acrylic stuff, which I just don't use nearly as much. Arbor sanding discs, these are great because they have a Velcro back on them, and so I cut little pieces of those off to use with my pen sander mostly. All right, this is all sponge sticks and sanding sticks, a whole bunch of Infinity sanding sticks or sponge sticks in there. They are my absolute favorite sponge sticks, but I've got quite a few others in there as well. All right, so that's that. Okay, so back over here to the paint booth area. I talked about my compressor before. Love that thing. This is one of the things that I wanted to be able to do, though, was have an air blower. So, before I paint something now, I make sure and use that to blow off any little bits of phlegm and dust. That helps a lot. When I showed you guys this section in the tool tour, I didn't have this thing here. I got this, another one of these little vintage filing cabinet things. This is an index card or a card catalog drawer set. Got this for $20 plus $50 shipping off of eBay. And it's great because it gives me a place to store all kinds of things. And I'm really kind of using this as a place to collect stuff that doesn't get a whole lot of use. Diorama dirt, figure bases, just stuff like that I don't want sitting out and just needs a place to live. Another one of my paint carousels. So this has got all my Vallejo metal color, which I use sometimes. It's an acrylic, obviously. I use that sometimes for brush painting metallic details. But what I've been using a lot more lately, at least, is all of these up here on top are my Liquitex acrylic inks, because I'm learning to use those a lot more and I like those a lot. And that right there is my Masterson wet palette that I use. That's invaluable. I'm learning if you're going to do figures and you're going to use acrylics, and really anytime you're going to use acrylics, even for just detail painting on an aircraft, for example, it's a little bit of a hassle, but using the wet palette really makes all the difference in the world when you're trying to brush paint those silly acrylics, because they just dry up so quick, especially, you know, for me living here, you know, where I have 10% relative humidity on a pretty normal basis. So anyway, paint booth. This is the Pashke, however the heck you say that, 22-inch wide spray booth. It's got a 250 CFM, cubic feet per minute, allegedly, blower in it. It's a 6-inch fan, so it moves quite a bit of air. And I duct it right through the wall behind the fan, or behind the spray booth there. That works pretty good. It's loud though, makes a lot of noise. I mean, like when I've got my face right in it and somebody walks up behind me and tries to talk to me, I totally can't hear them, but it does work well. The lights are these stick-on LED strips, and a couple of sets of those. You have 3 or 4 of them in a kit, and they just stick on with double-sided tape. And as you can see, they provide lots of illumination. And I have everything up here plugged into a power strip up here on top. So when I push the button on the power strip, the fan comes on and the lights come on at the same time. All right, I'm gonna shut that off because it's annoying, but as you can see, I got a couple of airbrushes stashed in here. This is my trusty Iwata Neo, and that thing, you know, I've been beating the piss out of that thing for the last 5 years. I do 90% of my work with it. It's a 0.35 millimeter needle, but it'll actually shoot pretty small, especially when you're using MRP. And I find very few things that I can't do with it. I tend not to shoot large surfaces with it. That's the main thing. Or if I need super, super small detail, I'll switch to my Sotar. But you can see, like, I don't even run the tail cap on it anymore because, a lot of times when you're using lacquers, you clean it out, you get a little bit of lacquer residue in there and it'll make the needle a little bit sticky. Well, this solves that problem right away because there's no way the needle chuck can slip on the needle. Okay, over here I've got my Iwata HPTH. I don't use it nearly as much. It's a super expensive airbrush. You can get a Mr. Hobby Procon boy, I forget which number it is, that's basically the same for about half the money, but this is a wonderful airbrush. It's a 0.5 millimeter needle, so I reserve it for spraying large stuff, but it'll actually spray surprisingly small, and it really, I mean, it atomizes wonderfully. I could practically use it as my only airbrush and get away with it, but only for certain things. These hooks are just hooks that I've made in Fusion 360, and they're printed. They're FDM printed parts with a big magnet on top, and they are great for that. One thing I forgot to mention is over here, this airbrush obviously has a MAC valve on it, but for those times when I want a MAC valve and I don't want to use that airbrush, I've got this. This is the Grex MAC valve, and I love it because it's got a large knob on it. It's super easy to activate, and you can dial it in, or dial it down for things like stippling. Okay, getting over here into the paint section. All right, this is just, obviously all of my thinners. Mr. Color Rapid Thinner, Mr. Color Leveling Thinner, regular old hardware store lacquer thinner. This says Ultimate Airbrush Cleaner on it, but it's actually just IPA, water, and mineral spirits. Even though I've got some other thinners, I've got this Tamiya lacquer thinner here, I really don't use it hardly any for paint. I've also got some X20A. Again, hardly ever use it. I never use it for paint. What I mostly use Tamiya lacquer thinner for is for cleanup. Like if I'm doing the wet removal method where I fill a gap with Mr. Surfacer 500, once that stuff sets up, you can remove it with Tamiya lacquer thinner pretty quickly, and it won't harm the plastic. If I get a little bit of paint on a piece of clear plastic, you can generally scrub it off with this stuff without harming the plastic. So, I keep it simple. These are basically all the things that I use for that stuff, that type of thing. This is Mr. Surfacer 1500. Keep it, pre-mixed with Mr. Leveling Thinner 50/50. Keep it in a bottle so it's nice and handy. That is Aqua Gloss back there. It's getting a little old, a little thick. It's time to get some new Aqua Gloss, but I keep it handy because, again, to be able to just spray that right out of that bottle or squirt it right out of that bottle into my airbrush is really handy. This is Mr. Leveling Thinner. This is Formula 409, which I use as a cleaner around the workbench, but also as a surprisingly good thinner and correcting fluid for certain acrylics, especially acrylic ink. Stynylrez, good. Sometimes I need some black Stynylrez as an acrylic primer. We all know and love that. It works good when you need that kind of thing. Hooray spray. Got to keep some hairspray handy and decanted. That's just Tresemme medium hold number 3 that I keep around, and I like to have it ready in a bottle. This is my nasty decal water. Again, it's just tap water that's got some, this actually has some microset in it. Microset is basically it's just a solution of acetic acid, which is another fancy way of saying vinegar. So that's basically all that is. It's got 10 or 20% in there, and I just use that, get a little bit out when I need some decal water. This is easily a couple of years old. It's kind of skunky looking. Maybe it's time to change it, but anyway, there's that. This is what I was telling you about with these little weighing boats. These things are handy too. These are from Guns, of course, like so many cool things. And it's in a little aluminum dish that's made for mixing, but I tend not to use it as much for that. What I do is I'll mix up some kind of a custom color in these little cups, and these make perfect little temporary lids for it. It's not totally airtight, but it'll keep it fresh for longer than just having it open. All right, this is called the Bottle Master. This is just a chunk of resin. Obviously, its purpose is pretty self-explanatory, but I designed this again for Masterpiece Models John Geigel. You can get those from him. More paint carousels to keep my paints handy. But yeah, they get roasted because of this window, and I'm getting ready to have a tree planted right out there to solve that problem. This is a relatively new thing on my bench. People have been talking a lot about these Vortex mixers, and this was about $60 on Amazon, so I decided to give it a try. I was not a fan to begin with, and I kept the box around for a week or two so I could make sure I was going to keep the damn thing, because it did not work as easily as I expected it to. And let me see if I can hold the camera and show you at the same time. I thought it would just be, stick the bottle on there and go. Well, not really, because I just, jammed the bottle down on there with full force, and it didn't really want to come on. What I found is that you kind of have to figure out the sweet spot. And once you do, and you kind of have muscle memory for it, it's actually a lighter touch that works better. And you can hear the BB, or the stainless steel ball that I've got in there doing the mixing. But once you figure out the sweet spot and kind of get that muscle memory, works great. I love it now. And you can see it mixes that up in a pretty big hurry. So I think it's pretty cool. Definitely decided to keep it. All right. There we go. That's a reference picture that I was using for my latest figure project, which is her sitting there right there. She's done finally. Gonna be glad to get her out of my life. All right, so here we go. Benchtop stuff. Obviously Q-tips, 2x reading specs so that I can see a little closer than I do with the 1x ones that I've got on my face right now. This is the little dental mixing pad I was talking about. This is a little piece of 4-inch sample coupon of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. Got those guys to send that to me for free. Just by basically emailing them, and it's great as a little small cutting board for anytime I need that. This is just more sanding stuff. These are pretty neat. These are from a company called 9 Steps, which is relatively new, but it's basically a division of Hearn's Hobbies for you guys down under. They're in Melbourne, if I understand right. And these are pretty nice. Just another kind of little sanding sponge. But also in here is one of my go-tos that I use a lot with body work. And that's just good old wet or dry sanding paper. Very important to have that around because sometimes, you know, the way that sandpaper behaves is largely dependent on what's behind it. And a sponge, obviously you get different densities of sponge. This stuff is pretty firm. Some of it's pretty soft, but sometimes the back of your fingertip is the ideal backing for a piece of paper. And because sandpaper is relatively stiff, it will float across things like, you know, panel lines or whatever without disturbing whatever's in them. So sometimes it's the ideal thing. All right, here we go. Lots of paint brushes. The one here in front, these are all my good brushes. You can see there's a bunch of Winsor & Newton Series 7s. One thing I always like to point out with the Series 7s is they have two different styles. The miniature has this real short, stubby tip, if it'll focus there. And I use those mostly for oils because you just really are working with paint on the very tip of the brush. On the other hand, if you are trying to do you know, if you're trying to do more traditional figure painting with acrylics, you want to load the belly of the brush up with relatively thin acrylic paint. You want the regular Series 7, which you can see has a longer bristle on it than the other does. So good to have both. I like to keep them both around. I've also got these neat little brushes. These are really cool. Tom Annie's, he of the really sweet resin details and universal decal kits, is producing these in conjunction with Calibri. And you can see that's just a really nice sort of general purpose bristle. I really use these for acrylic detailing for the most part, but they're great. And I love that triangular handle. I wish every brush had those. That's kind of the thing that all of these Colibri detailers come with. I've got a bunch of these, and I use these just for everyday acrylic brush painting. And then when they wear out, they get moved to this back container, which is just all of my scrub brushes. I mean, there's some that I use for specific things, like these whisks. These are nice. You can see that it's got this really cool tip on it. That's good for streaking. I think it's actually not a whisk. Wisp. If the camera will pick that up, there it is. Yeah, this is a Royal Aquilon Wisp, and I get a set of 5 of these for pretty cheap money. Very handy. You can see there's one that's really small right there. It's like 1/4 of an inch. I also have that gigantic, like 1-inch filbert back there. That's my magic blender for oils. That thing is the shit. I don't know why, but it just works so good. Even for tiny, tiny little stains, I'll apply them with something like one of these little bitty things, and then I'll blend it with that, and it's just, oh, it's magic. Another really useful brush is this Royal and Langnickel No. 2 combo. It's kind of a filbert thing. I use that a lot with oils. Another one, this is Mike Rinaldi's favorite. This is super handy for blending, for doing washes, that kind of stuff, is this Lowe & Cornell 7020 Ultra Round No. 2. Really handy. This one's not showing it right now, but if I groom it with a little bit of spit, you can see how sharp that thing gets, and it's really useful for doing panel line washes. I like that a lot. So that, I think, kind of covers all the paintbrushes. Oh, here's a handy one. This is called a Deerfoot Stippler. You can do some interesting things with it. It's really stiff, so it can be useful for chipping. Okay, so here we go. Just working my way around the other parts of the bench. This is kind of where I just keep all of my glues. So regular old Loctite super glue, Loctite gel, which is useful sometimes, and then this Bob Smith extra thin super glue. I feel like at a minimum, you got to have some super thin super glue and some regular super glue. But what's kind of becoming my go-to for regular super glue is that stuff right there, that Star Bond black rubberized super glue. I have typically despised cyanoacrylate. It's like when you want it to stick really good, it doesn't, and when you really need a little moment to position something, of course, it bonds immediately. And a lot of people like to use it as a filler. I typically have not. This black rubberized stuff kind of solves all of those problems. And I've been using it on occasion as a spot filler because it's not nearly as hard as the other stuff. So you don't get that differential sanding effect where the material you're trying to sand is so much harder than the surrounding styrene. So it's okay for some of that. This is some just a PVA glue that I've got to use for some foiling experiments. This is supposed to be the good stuff. That is Great Plains Debonder. This stuff is great. You can polish super glue or wash super glue right off of polystyrene with that stuff, and it will not damage the plastic. They are not all created equal in that respect. So always keep these when I'm done using them for mixing, because I use the tops of them, again, as a disposable place to put some super glue or a little bit of, whatever. And of course, I'm, always minding my P's and Q's because I've got Yoshi here supervising. He's the pilot from the Tamiya, the old school Tamiya Zero, and he was a little bit of a figure painting exercise. Anyway, kind of moving across, I've got this Revell glue that somebody sent me. Actually, Matt Bowl at Hobby World USA sent it to me to try out. It's supposed to be kind of like extra thin. I'm not a huge fan. I used it to glue these carousels together. It works fine on acrylic sheet. That's what these are all made of. This is a product that I designed that Masterpiece Models also carries. But anyway, that's about all I'm using it for. Right here, this is the Tamiya Orange Cap. This just should basically be called Tamiya Extra Thick because it's the same stuff, only goopier. It's good when you need a little bit more working time. Silly putty, very good to have around when you need to do a little bit of freeform masking. This is a bottle of goopy old all-clad ALC 309 primer. The stuff went bad on me, and the microfiller started to turn into gravel, which I didn't find out until I sprayed it on something. A couple of tests revealed that it was not me, that the stuff had just gone bad, and it happened in the space of a month. So I'll never trust it as a spray primer again, but it's got a really nice thick consistency, and it's extremely hot. It's a lacquer, and it will etch right into polystyrene. So it makes a really good lightweight filler. And I use it on a lot of my body work as a spot filler when I don't want to use something like the spot glazing compound. I'm using it for the same thing. But like, let's say I've got a scratch that's, a little too deep to sand out, but not deep enough to justify full-on filler treatment. This is greatness for that. Just brush it on, give it about half an hour, and you can sand it. Kicker for super glue, got to have some of that. Got two different bottles of sprue goo here. If you're not familiar with sprue goo, that is basically just your favorite kind of styrene mixed with extra thin until it turns into this goopy mix. And it's kind of my go-to filler, definitely my go-to filler if I need to do any scribing or riveting, because it's basically native material, and nothing scribes or rivets better than native material. And the way that I make it is I use Tamiya and or Hasegawa plastic because they're both pretty hard. And the harder polystyrene is, the more pure it is. So the most pure version is the clear stuff. That's its native form. Don't use evergreen. Evergreen is soft and it's got a lot of modifiers in it. Now this stuff works pretty good. I also add a little bit of green Mr. Paint or MRP lacquer to it so that it's easier to see. This works pretty good, but it has a tendency to be a little soft yet, softer than the surrounding styrene. So given that I knew that clear was harder, the hardest, I made a batch from clear Hasegawa styrene. And this is my new favorite thing. Obviously, I added some red lacquer to make it easier to see, but this stuff is great. For whatever reason, it does not seem to create pinhole bubbles nearly as much as the other stuff does. And that's an issue that some people find with sprue goo, is that it will give you those little pinholes. I just kind of deal with it, but this doesn't do it as bad, so I love it. It sands better, works great. And then, of course, just got some extra thin right there. And then this is a little extra thin bottle holder that I designed also, again, for Masterpiece models. All right, going back across there, kind of going back to some of the tools. So lots of sanding and polishing sticks. These are my 4 most used Infinity sponge sticks. 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. When I'm doing body work like I am all over this P40, doing a lot of spot priming, sanding, filling, you know, basically just basic body work. When I'm done, I get it down to an 800 or 1,000 grit finish. That's plenty good enough. That's perfect for painting on top of. There's really just no reason to go any further than that. All right, but sometimes you need a more rigid sanding stick, and that's what I've got over here. Infinity makes a couple of others. They make these are called their zebra sticks, and this is just a big honking sanding thing. It's pretty rigid, pretty big, and you know, it works good. I mean, I don't use it nearly as much, especially this being a 220. But it's good to have around, and you really need to hog some material off. I've got a whole set of those. What I do use a lot is they have these others. These, I believe, are called their Matador sticks. I don't know where they came up with that name, but these are really good. This one, the 400, is one that I end up using a lot. It's, you know, it's stiffer than a sponge, but still not totally rigid. Very useful. All right. These little things here, I am struggling to remember where I got these. These are a guy in, oh, there it is. Right there. Yeah. What does that say? Oh, it's upside down. No wonder I can't read it. Anyway, yeah, it's been so long since I bought these, I couldn't remember where I got them from. And I can't even read that now. But anyway, these are just basically little micro diamond files, and you can see how thin they are. He has a selection of them. This is one of those things, they were kind of a luxury purchase. They were not cheap. That is about 75 bucks worth of files right there. It's one of those things, though, I don't use them very often, but when I do need them, nothing else would work. So, yeah, there you go. All right, lots of other tools here. People love to give me a hard time about this cup because, you know, I got pointy knife blades sticking up out of there, but it's okay. It keeps me sharp. What I've got in here, this is all just cutty and scribey type things. A lot of my, you know, this is where all my razor saws are. I use these more for scribing than I do for cutting. In particular, this one. Okay, this is these are all from the Tamiya razor saw set, and this is the 0.15 millimeter thick version. And this particular one is one of my go-to scribing tools. It works really, really good, and for just cleaning out panel lines that get full of swarf and sanding dust, you know, whatever. And then I just bought myself a pack of a dozen cheapo X-Acto handles on Amazon that I can put them all in. So that works really good. I also have my glue loopers in here. These things are fantastic. I know, you know, guys will just make a super glue applicator from like the cut off the end of a sewing needle. I like these because lazy, already made for me, and because I can put them in an X-Acto handle, and it gives me a lot of precision in applying super glue. The irony is that I end up cutting the end of that one open so that it looks like the tip of a sewing needle that's been cut off, or the eye end of a sewing needle. It just works better that way. And I use this medium one mostly for the extra thin super glue. Like when I want to wick some underneath the edge of a photo etch part, works great for that. Okay, all right. So scooting on over, this is my tweezer cup. Set of gripper tweezers with a little piece of Infini sponge in it. That's one of my go-to sanding tools that I use anytime I need to sand in a really small area. It works great. These black tweezers are from iFixit. I've been using this set for years. They work fantastic. I love them. Nice and sharp. I got some new ones. These are the 9-step ones that I was talking about earlier. They make all kinds of tools, including these orange-handled nippers. These are single-blade nippers, and they're just like my Gundam Planet version 1.0s that are next to them. I've had these for about 5 years, and they are still sharp as shit. I love them. They still work great. They have a version 2.0 now, which is good because they were out of stock on them for a long time, but they're great. These are my Xuron 9180 photo etch shears. They're indispensable for cutting really, really thin sheet metal. And then, of course, there's just my junky Xuron nippers back there that I use for, you know, chopping up bits of sprue for sprue goo or whatever. This is a 6-inch mil bastard file. Seems a little big, but that's counterintuitive. You really need one of those. It's great for when you need to make, you know, a really planar surface. You know, keep it planar. Works really good. I've got a whole video about using files. These little bitty files are all Suji Burrito files. They are, again, super expensive. A set of 6 of them was about $100, but I love them. I think they're fantastic. This one, you know, this flat one is the one that I go to the most. It's great, super sharp. It's a safe edge file, meaning it doesn't have teeth on the edge. And if I were only going to buy like one of these, this would be the one, but you also really need a rat tail or round one. So if I were going to say, you know, to get the two that are indispensable, it'd be the flat one and then this one. And there are other brands, you know, there's really good Swiss files are definitely a thing. But I just happen to like those Japanese ones. They work really, really good. So that's all of that in this area right here. Oh, okay, so we'll move on over. On the bench top, this is where I keep my knives. You know, I like the general purpose X-Acto. I use the number 2 blade. I like the fatter handle. That's just kind of, you know, my sort of general purpose blade. But for actual modeling work, I really much prefer scalpels. And I stick to, this is a number 22 scalpel blade. This handle is, this is like the dental or the veterinary handle. They're a lot cheaper than the, you know, super high zoot, Bard Parker, Swan Morton stainless steel handles. And I prefer the ergonomics of these better because they are fatter and they're easier for me to control. And they're like, this handle's like $7. And you know, the blade refills are pretty cheap too. But yeah, I like that number 22. Also, this other handle and that tiny little blade, that's a number 15 blade. Very, very useful. I use that a lot. It's just great for getting into tight places. And sometimes I use them a lot as adzes when I want to just scrape some plastic off. All right, I get a lot of questions about these two things right here. These are called 1-2-3 blocks. They're a staple in machine shops, and they're called that because they are literally 1 inch by 2 inches by 3 inches. And you might say, well, what the heck would you use those for? Well, I use them for a lot of things. They're great when you need a chunk of weight to to hold something down, when you need something that's really square, you know, you can prop stuff up between the two of them. It'll stay put. I often will use a piece of poster tack and stick small parts to it for painting, because one of the things that I do, to be able to control things for detail painting is, because that's typically taking place on little bitty parts, is I attach little bitty parts to much huger and heavier parts because they don't tend to shake and vibrate. And I like these, because I can prop it on its edge and hold it with one hand, and it's not going to rock and move around. And then I can reach in there with my other hand and do my painting or whatever. I use the heck out of these for that type of thing. In fact, I had her attached to this one for the entire course of the project until last night. So very handy. All right, so moving on over here, got some green things. Yeah, this must be diorama supplies. That must be for groundwork. You never know when you're going to need some little tiny bushes, right? This other green thing is the power supply. It's the variable speed control. It's the NG5E for the Proxon system, and you can see my Proxon micro mote is over there on the side of it. That's my go-to rotary tool. Love it. I use it for polishing, grinding, hogging out material, that sort of thing. I've got a whole video review thing on that as well. Then, of course, there's my anvil. My anvil, that's one of my favorite things. I use it for a lot of the same reasons that I use these 1, 2, 3 blocks, but that one has a special place in my heart because my uncle, who's been gone a long time now, he was a model railroader, and he got to a point in his life where he couldn't do model making anymore, and that anvil ended up in his stash of supplies, and it found its way to me. That thing's probably 60, 70 years old. Who knows, where it actually came from, but love the magic anvil. All right, since we're on top of the bench, keep working our way around. Okay, that drill press looking thing, that is in fact the drill press for the Proxon system. I can put the micro mote in that and use it as a drill press or as a poor man's milling machine. It's not the greatest, but it definitely does get the job done. All right, so let me kick some things out of the way here. All right, so this stuff, all right. This is the hole punch I was telling you about, and this was, talk about a boondoggle. I was doing something that required a whole bunch of little round discs, and I did not want to use the hammer method on every single one of them because it was literally like 100 of them. And so I started thinking, well, what could I do to make that slicker? And so I got this little Arbor press, and this is the Sensipress from Northwest Shortline. Not cheap, about $100, but it is just a miniature Arbor press, and it's pretty simple. So then I took my dies from my UMM punch set down to my local machine shop, had them just drill a hole in the middle of it, and put a threaded hole in the base of this in the right spot so that I can put the punches, and they had to also bore out the bottom of the Arbor, but I can put my punches in here, and then, here we go, let me switch hands. All right, so as you can see, then I just basically put it together loose, and then tighten up this bolt right here, and then I can just punch and withdraw. Well, it's not tightened up obviously because the punch stuck in, it came out of the Arbor, but anyway, it just turns it into a rapid fire punch press basically, and I love it. But by the time it was all said and done, yeah, I don't even want to tell you how much money I spent on that, but I love it. It works great. I can punch little round discs all day long, by the hundreds if need be. All right, so just a couple of other odds and ends there. Vise, one of those multi-holders I don't use a whole lot. A little scale that comes in handy occasionally. Pencil sharpener, you need one of those. All right, so that's all of that stuff. Let's move into these drawers. And that will about wrap it up, I think. But as you can see, there's lots of drawers here. Okay, I almost forgot. That right down there is the foot feed for, or really just a foot switch. It's not a speed control for my Proxxon, but it is magic. Being able to hold the part in one hand and the drill in the other hand and then kick it with my foot, that is, yeah, it's the only way to fly. All right, so here we go. Top drawer. This is important for whenever you need to label things, measure things, a set of cheap $20 digital calipers. You need to make inside or outside threads. There's a bunch of those glue loopers. That's how they come. And then some little scribing templates that I use occasionally. That's all of that stuff. All right, next drawer. Okay, this is cutting and scribing mostly. All right, those blobs on the handles are made out of epoxy sculpt. They just allow me to customize the grip to be a little bit more controllable. But you can see I have a lot of important tools in here. Fiberglass brushes, both kinds. A lot of people don't realize that there's two. This kind here, the thicker kind, is softer. It's called a scratch brush. It's good for just kind of just general scrubbing, smoothing down. Doesn't really do a whole lot though, as far as like removing plastic. I use it actually for chipping a lot when the paint is really tough. This one, however, it is an angry little thing and it will eat plastic in a big hurry. So just keep in mind, if you want a fiberglass brush, there's two of them. All right, a pair of dividers, some rivet wheels. These are Rosie the Riveter. I like these. I mean, there's a lot of decent ones, but I like the handles on these. This is the Mission Models chisel. Works pretty good for the rare occasion that I need a chisel. I forgot I had this chisel as well. I think that's Trumpeter maybe. I can't, no. Master Tools is what that says on it. Yeah, I just rarely use chisels because I tend to use my Proxxon and a grinding burr in situations where you might need one. All right, but I do a lot of scribing. This one right here, this is the Paul Budzik Standard. It's a dental pick. I use that for wider lines. Got a couple here that are just pointy. I use those more for punching rivets than I do scribing. I don't really like to use a point for scribing because it just displaces. It doesn't actually cut. What I want is to see little curls of plastic coming off. So this blue-handled scriber is my go-to. It's the medium size. It's from MRP. Martin Schneider makes these by hand, and they're fantastic. This blue handle is the medium size. The black-handled one right there is the skinny size, and then the red one is just a pointed one. And again, I use it just for punching rivets more than I do for scribing. Sometimes you don't have any choice, like you got to go around a curved panel outline or something, but yeah, I really try to stay away from the pointed scribers as much as possible. I got a couple others in there. This is the Trumpeter one. It's okay. It's kind of, it works fine. It's kind of rough. I just don't really care for the handle on it. I've got this RB Tools one. It works okay too, but it falls apart, and I just don't ever feel like putting it back together. All right, so there's all that stuff. Next drawer is tape. Everybody's got to have a tape drawer. And I've got a bunch of different kinds of tape in here, but my go-to masking and part fitting together tape is just the MT washi. MT is the company that invented washi tape. Washi just means it's rice paper tape. And there's a lot of reasons to believe that they make it for Tamiya. I mean, the wide Tamiya tape, which is a little different and not as nice, says Kamoi tape on the inside of it, and the parent company for MT is Kamoi Kakoshi. And you can go to their website, you can read all about how they developed washi tape. I've got a video about it. It's called The Great Kabuki Tape Fraud of 2016. It explains the whole thing and how silly the term kabuki tape is. It's the most meaningless thing. It's just dumb. Anyway, this is High-Q scribing tape that I use. It's kind of like using Dymo, but I like it better. I've got two different widths of that. I do have some Dymo in here. That's that red thing right there. Got quite a few rolls of vinyl tape. Okay, that's basically just your vinyl pinstriping tape for when you need to scribe a curved line. Pretty much indispensable for that. This is a roll of washi tape from Masterpiece Models. John Geigel has it. He sells them in these big rolls. It's really good stuff. This is the Tamiya vinyl tape for curves. This 3M double-sided tape, indispensable. I use this for paint fixturing. I just, like grab a wooden stick or a piece of cardboard and I use this to stick parts to it for airbrushing. This blue tape is vinyl stuff that I found. You can see it gets down to a 1mm size. Found it on Amazon. Again, I don't have to use the vinyl tape very often. It's real aggressive and it'll yank your paint off in a hurry. But it is good to have. It's one of those things, when you gotta have it, you gotta have it. Post-it notes, gotta have those. Panzer putty. I don't use it a whole lot, but again, it's the right tool in certain situations. You just have to be careful, because if you leave it on something for very long at all, it oozes into every single nook and cranny. These little rolls here, this is Izu masking tape. You can see it is cut into incredibly skinny widths. This is 0.4mm, I believe. Very handy for some things. You just never know when you're going to need really, really skinny masking tape. All right, next drawer. This is airbrushy type things, spare parts, cleaning things, dental paper points, and interdental brushes. You got to have those for proper airbrush cleaning. My #1 power tool is, see that interdental brush that's got the brass that's stuck into the end of a piece of brass tubing? That's for getting all the way into the needle bore. These interdental brushes, the brush will unscrew from the plastic handle if you turn it left. Don't know why that is, but it works. Take it out, glue it, super glue it into that piece of brass tubing, and you can get all the way into the back end of your airbrush. That red thing is an Iwata needle or nozzle wrench, indispensable. So there's my Sotar. It's got the high roller trigger, works a little bit better for me. This is a Grex grip that I've modified to fit it. Helps me out a lot. Got some spare Grex parts. This is a Grex airbrush. It's a good airbrush. I just don't use it very much, and I keep the fan tip on it because it works pretty good. But a fan tip needs higher flow rates. Like, you can airbrush normally on like 1 CFM, but you need more like 2 or 3 CFM for a fan tip to really do its job. And that's another reason that I went ahead and got the big compressor, because along with being able to run shop air pressures, I get shop air flow. This thing I think does 3.3 CFM at full pop. So I can use a fan tip all day long. All right, then I've also got, there's a Paschke, I hate that name, whatever that is, the Venerable H, you can do a lot with that thing. I don't use it very much. This is my Iwata HP M1, the single action. It's good for like blowing, a bunch of clear, stuff like that. I recently used it to spray some glue in part of my foiling exercise. It works good. All right, oil paints. This is all about oil paints in this drawer. I'm a big fan of the Winsor Newton stuff. It's just good. But these Michael Graves or M. Graham and Company, whatever they are, there's a few other brands in there. This Michael Graves neutral gray is wonderful. And for whatever reason, Winsor & Newton does not make a neutral gray. So I like it a lot. I've got some Ab Tai Lung 502 oils in there. They come in a few handy shades. So that's a really valuable drawer there when it comes time to do weathering. This is the Drilly Pokey drawer. Obviously, that's my Proxxon Miss 1, which is a wonderful, it's actually an electric screwdriver, but I use it as a drill. It works wonderfully for that. Got all of my circuit board bits in this holder. This is a thing that I designed and I got somebody to print for me. Holds all these bits. And then of course you need a lot of spares, because if you don't know, circuit board bits are super brittle and they will snap off if you look at them funny. So you know, like I have a rule, never use them for blind holes, because extracting the tip of a broken tungsten bit out of a blind hole is just a bad day. Ask me how I know. So I also have this little set. This is invaluable. This you can get from Excel. This is a set of high-speed steel wire drills. And like the smallest one, I think, is, let's see if I can see in there. Kind of hard to tell. Number 79, I think, is the smallest. 80, which is a 0.0135. So 13.5 thousandths. So basically, that is about 0.3 millimeters. So really, really handy. And the chuck, the 3-jaw chuck on both this drill and on my micro moat up there will go down small enough to be able to use those. This is also invaluable. If you don't have one of these and you do aircraft and you ever need to make round rivets, like to represent Zeus fasteners, and you don't have a beading tool, you're doing it wrong. You know, yeah, you can use like pieces of brass tubing or hypodermic needles or whatever, but the trick is finding the right size. And with this thing, you can see how closely graduated they all are. So, I mean, you're definitely going to be able to find the right size here. And it's got that nice wooden handle. Fantastic for punching little round circles into the surface of polystyrene. Got a couple of pin vise handles. This is the super duper Bill West version with the bearing in it. I just don't use pin vices a lot, because if I'm going to do much drilling, I'm going to get out the power tools. But if I've drilled a hole and it's not quite right, or if the kit comes with a hole in it that needs to be made a little bit larger, that's where you need a reamer, or as these are called jeweler's broaches. And this, Peter Buckingham on Scale Modelers Group, Scale Modelers Critique, I can't even talk. Peter Buckingham is one of our OG members on Scale Modelers Critique Group. He is a world-class motorcycle modeler, and he's the one that turned me on to these things. I got these at Rio Grande Tools here in the United States. These things are fantastic. You can see that basically it's just a super skinny tapered reamer. And so if you need to just, you know, ooch a hole out to a slightly larger size, this thing is fantastic. That's what reamers are for. It's just to, you know, gradually make a hole a little bit larger. All right, so there's that. This is the grindy, polishy drawer. Lots of, you know, fittings to, you know, for my micro moat, to do bulk material removal, sanding, polishing, cutting. That's a little Dremel saw. These are the type of wheels you need if you're going to do polishing. For the most part, this is just the cotton polishing wheel that's pretty standard. These things are easy to get. You get them super cheap. And you can use those with a liquid or a paste type polish. Piece of 4/0 steel wool, you just need that. It's really handy. Like if I've done a bunch of panel line scribing and I want to just make sure that all the edges are nice and smooth, I'll whip across it with that piece of 4/0 steel wool. It works great. Okay, this is just kind of the catch-all drawer for larger tools. That's my Proxxon pin sander. These are my Zona razor saws. Those are really good for like cutting pour blocks off of resin castings and things. That gizmo back there is a tubing cutter. You're supposed to be able to clamp like a little piece of brass tubing in it, and then it's got a guide for the saw blade. Yeah, just doesn't work that great. It's not awesome. But there is not really a great way to cut tubing. I don't know. Yeah, that's a painful subject for me because I can never get the ends of my tubing to be perfectly straight. Actually, the best way to do it is just to roll them under a blade and then snap them off, but that's not as easy as it sounds. Okay, this thing I use that to chop sanding sticks. It's just a choppy, pruny thing I got on Amazon. You can see how it works. Yeah, that's what that's for. Okay, that gets that set of drawers. Okay. All right, let's jump over here. Next set. All right. Pliers, every kind of little small pliers you can imagine. The ones I use the most, like these little channel locks, are great for opening stubborn paint jars. These little flat ones I use for bending photo etch a lot. These round nose pliers are great for creating nice round radius bends in wire. Very important. This set of pliers right here, these soft jaw pliers, you can, if you buy the Iwata toolkit for like 80 bucks, you get the nozzle wrench and some other things. You get the packing seal screwdriver and all that, and you get a set of these. I bought these on Amazon for $13. They work great. The occasional time that like the paint cup is too tight and I need to unscrew it for cleaning or whatever. All right, pretty self-explanatory. Pens, pencils, watercolor pencils. Never really got on that bandwagon. I tried them, ended up giving most of them away. All right, sandpaper, yay, and steel wool, yep. All right. Yep, knife blades, gotta have a stash of knife blades, knife handles. That's all my scalpel blade stash. Important stuff. All right, yeah, this is kind of a catch-all drawer. Let's see. Got a little screwdriver kit, glasses cleaning. This is the reason that I don't use my Dremel torch anymore, because this little cigar lighter is plenty hot enough for anything I need to do. I mean, soldering works great. So very handy. These are my Infinity cutting mats. That type A is the one that I use the most, and it's fantastic. If you're not familiar, it's just a sheet of hard plastic, and these lines are engraved in it. You can hear them. It's not a cutting mat. It's a cutting guide. And the reason that it's got these lines engraved in it is because that's what guides your knife, so that you can cut really thin little strips of tape if you don't have a roll of 0.4 millimeter ISO tape. So there you go. All right, if you need a little portable handheld impact device, there's my ball peen hammer. Let's see, some brass pipe fittings are for some reason. This thing right here, yeah, that's great for punching little round discs. I think that's what that's for, right? I don't know why I have 10 of them. Anyway, that's that drawer. Okay, next drawer, here we go. This is all weathering products. Oops, got a little bit of a sunbeam there. See if I can get that in the shade so that's not too distracting. So anyway, this is all just obviously various ammo and AK enamel and pigment products. You can see. The cool thing about this drawer is the way that I've got this organized. This is a trick that some of us picked up from Paul Budzik's channel, where you put these right angle things in here. Let me see if I can move some of these so you can see a little bit better. Well, so that's the overall view. But all that is in my case anyway, is it's pieces of 2-inch aluminum flashing, which is just a real thin aluminum angle. You could use anything that's got a right angle on it, as long as it was two-sided. So flashing, angle iron, whatever, you could use anything. But basically all I did is I had them cut to length to fit in those drawers, and then I drop them in there, and I just squirted some extra thin super glue in the joint down there just to keep them in place. But you really don't even have to do that. I suppose you could use double-sided tape or something like that. Anyway, works great. I love having them organized this way, where they're out of sight, out of mind when I don't need them. And when I do need them, I can look in here and I can see all of these labels. Just super easy. All right, next drawer is more of the same thing. This is all of my Mr. Surfacers. Decal setting solutions, got quite a few of those. Liquid masking fluids. This is retarder for acrylic paint, and then this is for oil paints, linseed oil and sans odor, which is just Winsor & Newton's odorless mineral spirits. The linseed oil does the same thing that retarder does for acrylics. Makes your oil paints creamier, smoother. It takes them longer to dry. So that's what's in that drawer. Then the very last drawer is just clamps and bottle openers. And that's that. Okay, it just wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't forget something, right? Anyway, I came in this morning, turned the lights on, and realized I forgot to talk about my lights. And hey, there's probably no single more important tool than light for what we do. So what I have is a couple of these Neatfi LEDs, and these things have been great. Don't screw up like I did. I didn't realize that they came in both white and silver. But yeah, anyway, as far as the light itself, they are really nice and bright. I use them even during the daytime, even though I obviously have plenty of light, but they're great. They have 5 different settings. I typically just run it on full bright. The one thing I don't like is that you can't adjust the color temperature, and they're a little bit cool, maybe slightly, but not enough to really bother me. So there you go. Now, what do they plug into? That's also important. I forgot to mention before that I've got these power strips. This one has 10 outlets. I got it at at Lowe's for you guys in the United States. I've got another one over here running behind my paint booth for that. And that handles all of my power needs on top of the bench. And these are hardwired in, but you can also get the kind that just plugs straight in. And they're great. They're like $50 a piece. I also have outlets underneath the bench for stuff, that needs to plug in down there. And then like right there, I've got a hole cut so that the cable for my Proxon foot feed can reach down to the floor. Now the other thing about my lights is they have to have something to swivel on. You can, they come with clamps, so you can clamp them to the edge of your bench like this thing kind of is. But for that and for my camera, I wanted something a little slicker. So these fittings are from a company called Heil, H-E-I-L. You can see it down there. You have to drill an 1.5 inch diameter hole, and then that fitting drops through the hole, and it's got a big nut that goes on the bottom. And as you can see, well, the whole thing's not supposed to be turning. That's not good. But at any rate, that's the way it works. They are not cheap. They're about $30 a piece. Musicians like, high-priced equipment, I guess, but you can see that one's working the way it's supposed to. Anyway, those things are super good. All right, so there you go. I hope you guys found that useful. I know it was kind of whiz-bang there. I am not going to go back and provide you with links or whatever to every single thing that I mentioned. You should be able to find all of it pretty easily on the old interwebs. There may be a couple of specialty items there, and I tried to mention where I got those, but by and large, I do all of my hobby shopping at Hobby World USA. Matt Bowl, you guys have heard me talk about him before. I'm a big fan. He's a good dude, and he runs a good business, and I like to support that. I get stuff on Amazon if that's what's easy, and for non-modeling specific stuff, that's, pretty much always the ticket. So there you go. I hope you guys found this useful. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you watch the whole thing, as always, I appreciate it. Much love.